Need a reminder of the good in the world? How about inspiration as to how you can personally make a difference in your own life? Join me, Kate Chericello, each week on Be the Good with Kate, as I chat with an individual following their passions and making the world a better place because of it. I get so excited about each and every episode to share with you, and I hope you find inspiration in these people and stories. If you're new here, welcome. And if you're returning, thank you so much for your support. I'm so glad you found Be the Good with Kate and would love to hear from you. If you would like to help me in reaching more people, I would be thrilled if you would share via Instagram, Facebook, email, or however you can. Every single share, subscriber, like, review, comment, and so on helps me to share these guests' wonderful work to more people. Thank you for your help. Each of us has the power to make a difference. So now on to this week's episode. Let's spread a little more goodness in the world.
Shelley Smartly is today's guest, and she found a way to bring smiles to other people's faces by first seeking a way to bring joy to herself. After the death of her husband, Shelley started to seek out comedy. And she first became a professional audience member, which I loved that term on their website, and then became a comedian herself. She is now the showrunner and creator of the Smartlys. It is an award-winning TV, radio, and podcast series. And she's here with me today. Shelley, thanks so much for being on the show.
Well, thank you, Kate, and thank you for the wonderful introduction. I really appreciate it.
Oh, well, thank you, because I know you were going to fill out this introduction even more. Please tell us who you are and what you do in your own words.
Okay, well, you already covered the part of the Smartlys, but I'm also a 73-year-old widow, and I became a stand-up comedian when I was 69 years old. So, but from my past, you wouldn't have ever dreamed that I would have become a comedy TV show creator. I'm the past founder and president of the International Scleroderma Network, which was a nonprofit dedicated to helping people around the world with a very serious disease. And I'm the co-editor of 3 books called the Voices of Scleroderma book series. So, but that began, and I think that this is important for a lot of people to understand, that they think that they might need to have the perfect life in order to become a success or in order to pursue their dreams. And for me, the journey towards my today actually began when I was diagnosed with a terminal illness. And that was in the mid-90s. And the doctor told me that I had 3 to 5 years left to live and that there was no treatment and no cure. So that kind of astounded me. A lot of people, they would kind of wrap up their life at that point. So that's exactly what I did. I planned my funeral. I set my affairs in order. And then I set about thinking, how can I make a difference? You know, what can I do with the limited time that I do have left? What's the best thing that I can do with my time? And although I was completely disabled and suffering severe cognitive problems and severe fatigue at the time, I decided that it was difficult, very, very difficult then, to find any quality information on scleroderma in the world. I even went to the library and they didn't even have any books on scleroderma. So there was nothing that I could turn to. Finally, I found a support group. And when I showed up the first day at the support group, I said, you know, you guys should have a website, because it was really, really hard to find this support group. And they said, that's a great idea. Why don't you do it?
Of course.
And I was thinking, I can't do it. I'm suffering cognitive difficulties and I'm so tired. But nobody else was doing it. So I felt that it was important. And so it took me 6 months to learn how to make my first hyperlink. But I didn't give up on it, even though it was very difficult. This was before the internet was hardly even born, you know. And then I created a website. At first, it was called Scleroderma from A to Z. And in one page, I covered everything in the world that somebody should know about scleroderma. Eventually, it became, I formed a nonprofit agency around the website. It grew to over 2,000 pages in 23 languages. We had patients and doctors from all around the world who pitched in and volunteered and gave their time to make it a quality website with quality medical information, with support that people could rely on all around the world. And as you can see, I lived through that time, and through some of the things that I learned doing my outreach, I think it helped me prolong my life, and certainly gave me a sense of mission that helped get me out of bed every day, which is very hard when you're suffering from a terminal illness.
Wow. That idea of not giving up, and even whether you think you have 3 years to live, or you think, I don't know how many years I have left to live, and look at the outcome, and you have been fighting it, and you have helped so many other people along the way. And that was, I don't even want to say was, because I'm sure, all of this information is still out there, still helping people. And this is just one aspect of all the things you have and are doing to help people.
Yeah, and along the way, my late husband also had very serious illness. He was on oxygen for 10 years before he had a lung transplant. And after he had his lung transplant, we moved to California, which was absolutely wonderful. We're from Minnesota. And so we were like two kids in a candy shop, being able to enjoy beautiful weather all year round. And we truly enjoyed that. But at the same time, you realize that we're far away from our family and our friends that we've known our whole life. And 2 years later, he passed away from leukemia. So my life had been very serious for several decades, with kind of nonstop serious things to deal with. And what I felt when he passed away was, I knew I could survive it, but only if I could laugh again. I had to be able to laugh. And so I did a very unusual thing for grieving widows, I'm sure. And that's the 2 weeks after he passed away, I went to my first stand-up comedy show. And I was able to laugh again. And I absolutely loved it. And I needed the endorphins. I needed the social community. I needed people. And that was a resource for me. So I started going to comedy shows every night of the week. And I continued that. I dubbed myself a professional audience member. And San Diego has a brilliant stand-up community with great performers from all around the world. We draw a lot of performers from LA. So I was really exposed to some of the finest comedy in the world. And several years after that, I got properly diagnosed for the illnesses that I have. I have multiple autoimmune syndrome. And one of them is, several of them are extremely serious, but I was able to get treatment finally after so many years, of having been told that I had a dread disease and there was no treatment and no cure. But finally, I was eligible for a treatment. However, it required 35 hours a week of infusions. And so for 7 hours a day, 5 days a week, I had a nurse trailing me along with my little port while I was getting my infusions. And to recover from that, every night I would go to a comedy show because I really needed the uplift. And then finally I decided that I should start using my infusion time to write things that were funny. And so I began doing that. And finally I felt good enough that I enrolled in a stand-up comedy course. And I became a stand-up comedian myself. And within just a few months, I was performing in real shows, the kind that people paid money for.
This is just blowing my mind. And I keep going back to, the improv principle of yes and, right? So any audience member who doesn't know that, it's one of the basics of comedy is if you're doing a scene or you're thinking of something, never say no, just always say yes, because yes opens the door to the next step, right? To summarize it quickly. And I feel like that has been your whole life that you've explained just now, is that you could have said no so many times, but you kept saying, okay, yes, this is what's happening, and what can I do next to to bring something better. That is just remarkable. And even just from the standpoint of, you didn't say, let me get some comedy in by sitting on my couch and watching a funny show. You said, I'm getting out the door. What was that like? Because I know, like, when you're down, often the last thing you want to do is do anything, right? But you got yourself out that door. What was that like?
I knew that I had to.
Mm,
I'm naturally very much of an introvert.
okay.
And I found in my past life that when I had difficult times in my life, I tended to really become introverted. I could become seriously depressed. And I knew that the only way out of that was to reach out and be with people every day. And that's a very, very hard thing for an introverted person to do. You have to force yourself, but I did force myself, and I am so glad I did. Through that, about 9 months after I became a stand-up comedian and was, in my first real show, I made arrangements to temporarily retire from the nonprofit agency. It was really weighing on me, and I felt that it was time for me to make a change in my life. I was very reluctant to do it, but I finally arranged for somebody to come in and run the nonprofit agency for 6 months and to figure out whether we needed to close it if I was going to retire forever, or if it could be, retained in some way. And an hour after that was approved by our board of directors, I was suddenly just gobsmacked with the idea that what I wanted to do was make a comedy TV show. I wanted to bring back old-fashioned comedy, like with George Burns and Gracie Allen, shows like from 50, 60, 70 years ago, and bring back the flavor of that when they really had strong comedic writing and great comedic timing. And so within the month, we had actually filmed our first sizzle clip. And 6 months later, we were producing our first pilot, which was on stage in front of a live audience in a senior center. And things moved so fast. It was just beautiful. And then I met my current partner, Eric, which you will meet in the show. And then there was the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And there was absolutely nothing about the pandemic that would enable us to continue doing what we did. We couldn't perform in front of a live audience in a senior center. So we scrapped the whole thing. And I rebuilt the show from scratch under the conditions of the pandemic so that we could have our actors film at home. They would be safe. They wouldn't be exposed to any illness. And Floyd Strayer, who's our director and producer, he stepped forward and he figured out a way that we could combine their performances digitally. And we didn't have anything better to do. I mean, it was the pandemic, for God's sake. And we really saw the need, not just for us, but for everybody in the whole world was going to need to recover from the tragedy of the pandemic. And I had found, and myself and Floyd had found through his own life, that comedy can be a road towards healing. And we felt that the whole world needed to heal at that point. So we pursued, and in the height of the pandemic, we created season 1 of the Smartlys.
Amazing. And now, since I know it's gotten awards, it's gotten all of this press, how did you go from creating it to that? Like, how did you get the word out? How did you get it shared? How'd that process work?
We absolutely didn't know what to do. Floyd and I were both first-time filmmakers, and we were absolutely shocked when our show got accepted for distribution. And so last April, we launched on Plex TV, and in August, we launched on Tubi TV. And now we're on like 5 or 6 different platforms. I can't even count them. And then when we were doing interviews to announce the launch of the TV series worldwide, the interviewers told us what a great radio program we would make, that was wonderful just to listen to our show. And we said, well, that's great, but we know how to make a TV show and air it worldwide, but we don't know how to make a radio show or a podcast. And so the interviewers literally educated us and their listeners on during our interview on how to go about it. And so a few weeks later, we launched our radio and podcast version of the Smartlys as well. So that's also now all 8 episodes are available for the public, free of charge, streaming everywhere in the world.
You just never know where education is going to come from, right?
Exactly. Just take it where you find it.
That's amazing. So I feel like you've covered so many, what I love to call good news moments. But I'm so intrigued by this moment that I'd love to go back to and frame in that moment of like accomplishment. When you first took the stage for your first time as a comedian, paint that picture.
I was scared to death, and in fact, that's what I made the opening line of my comedy show. I mean, I'm an introvert. This was really hard for me. I also had severe stage fright. It was a lot to overcome. So the opening line of my comedy show was that now I'm facing my fears head on, because when I tried backing into them, they canceled my car insurance. And I mean, really, I really think that sums it up. For all of us have fears. And the more fears we face, the more confidence it gives us to face others.
Yes. And when we don't face them, bad things happen.
Exactly. They'll cancel your car insurance. So for God's sake, go out there and face those fears. Don't run from them anymore.
And how did it feel when you stepped off the stage, knowing what you just accomplished?
I have never had a bigger high in my entire life as stepping away from my first comedy show where people were actually laughing. And I did climb a mountain once, and that is a real endorphin experience to stand at the top of a mountain. But this really rivaled it. Because I was facing so big of a fear. I wasn't afraid of climbing a mountain, but I was very afraid of standing on stage and trying to make people laugh. I mean, what if they didn't? What if I just made an absolute fool out of myself? But I had to accept going into it that it was completely okay for me to make an absolute fool out of myself. It was completely okay for people to not laugh. The only thing that would not be okay would be for me to not try.
There's crux of it right there. So what are there phrases or mantras that keep coming back to you during these times of challenges?
Yes, I have a very simple one. I think I made it up myself. Maybe somebody else did. I don't know. But in dealing with fatigue and illness, especially, it can really put a hamper in your day and what you can do from one minute to the other. And so for me, I created the thing of just saying, do what you can see. And if I could see that I could wash the dishes that minute, then I would wash the dishes. If I could see that, whatever it was I could see that I could do, to do that. And don't look at the big picture. Don't let yourself get overwhelmed by how much more there is to do. And I think that really helped me along in the development of the TV show, because I wasn't focused on doing the entire TV show. I was just like, okay, what can you see? What can you do today? What can you do in the next 5 minutes that can move you closer to that goal? It doesn't have to be anything major. I think the development of the TV show is really a lot of building blocks of very tiny things.
And that, for anyone in any situation, that mantra saying is so needed, because how often is it easy just to get overwhelmed by the whole thing, whatever the thing is, right? And if we just take it step by step, suddenly we get there, and it might be long and it might be short, but we'll get there.
Yeah, and I'm sure that you did that with the development of your podcast. You didn't.
100%.
There was no way that you could tackle everything at once. None of us can. And I think I had the benefit of illness. I also had the benefit of a feeling that I lived under very limited time constraints, because I think that gets you off your chair and into action. A lot of us think, oh, life is going to go on forever. I have another 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years ahead of me. I don't have that luxury. I always have that sense of urgency of, oh my God, this could be the last day. So how can I make the best of it? How can I spread my joy throughout the world today?
I love that mindset of, it wasn't just what can I do for me? You said, how can I spread my joy throughout the world today? Beautiful. Going along with that, if someone came to you and they wanted to make a difference and they just were feeling that overwhelmed, they didn't know how to start, what would you tell them encompassing that idea of taking it step by step?
I don't know. I mean, I have this kind of natural or imposed sense of urgency that I was really blessed with, that I think a lot of people don't have. When our life is going very well, we tend to not be as appreciative or as grateful or have as much of a sense of urgency. So a lot of times people might need to maybe even create their own emergency of imagining, okay, what if I was going to die, say, a year ago from now? What if? How would I live my life differently? What would I do different today? You know, what message would I like to leave behind? And I think a lot of my life, you know, in the last, 30 years has been focused on what message do I want to leave in the world? And I think that I've been super blessed with that, with the position of making it more serious to me again and again and again. And today I still continue my treatments. I still have infusions twice a week. I don't let it stop me, you know?
Wow. You're so inspiring. This is just, I want everyone to hear these stories, because how often do we, when we are considered quote unquote able-bodied or have no ailments, so to speak, that are giving us solid reason to not do fill in the blank, and we don't do it because, oh, we're tired or we're feeling this emotion or that. But you, like you said, just we need to make the most of every day, because we don't know if we have a day or a year or 100 years. So I think these are just beautiful, beautiful reminders.
I would also advise people to give their excuses away. We don't need to hold on to our own excuses. I don't have a college degree. There are a lot of people who would consider that if they wanted to create a television show, that they should go get a degree in filmmaking. Now, I'm not discouraging anybody who has a degree in filmmaking, for God's sake, but I don't even have a single course in any of it.
Yeah.
And Floyd and I learned hands-on during the pandemic. We used YouTube videos to learn everything that there was about filmmaking. We didn't know how to do video editing, and we learned because we had this TV show.
Oh my gosh. You never blamed your age. You never blamed your experience. You never blamed your education or your physical state. You just made it happen.
Or my finances, because we produced the entire season 1 of the Smartlys on the dregs of my Social Security check.
Oh my gosh.
And it is so easy to sit there and say, I want to make this multi-million-dollar, sitcom. I want people all around the world to enjoy it. But oh my God, I only have $500 a month to work with.
Right.
Okay, it's very easy to say it's impossible, but I'm here to say it's not. If you have a dream that you're willing to commit to it, and don't listen to excuses. I think excuses are probably the worst ailment that anybody could have.
Very, very strong sentence that I am obsessed with right now. I love that. Thank you for saying these things. Thank you for inspiring us. And 2 things before I let you go. First is, I read the synopsis and watched the clips of the Smartlys, but for the audience, since this might be their first introduction, they're going to go and look it up after this. Would you give the synopsis for them?
Well, sure. Eric and Shelley Smartly are king and queen of the Minnesota Renaissance Fair. We win the lottery and we win $300 million. So we buy a luxury beachfront complex on the shores of La Jolla in San Diego, where our entire family lives. And they are motivated to part us from our money by hook or by crook. So and we declare in the opening lines of the show that we're the luckiest couple in the world. And I truly believe that we are, because very, very few people are able to really reach out and affect people literally worldwide and share their love and their joy of life and their humor and their laughter. And so our show is a lot more like classic comedy than modern comedy, in that we have the funny and it keeps on coming, line after line after line. We really focus on the writing and the performance. We're over the top in acting, sort of like the old Beverly Hillbillies sort of thing. We have aliens, we have witches, we have just craziness. And we have enough insanity to keep us going for 8 seasons. So we have 8 seasons planned of the Smartlys. The 8th season will be our last, our 64th show. And that's because I feel very strongly that if you want to tell a story, you also need to know what the end of the story is going to be. Is it going to be a happy ending? Is it going to be a sad ending? What's it going to be? And as a writer, it's important to me to know where to drive my story, where the beginning is, where the middle is, and where the end is, to keep people involved and not only laughing, but going along with the emotional journey of the show as well.
Wonderful. Shelley, where can we find you and the Smartlys online?
Well, of course, you can just Google us. We're Smartlys. There's no apostrophe involved. Our website is thesmartlys.com, and there we list all of the TV platforms that we're on, radio and podcasts, as long with our social media. We have profiles of all of our actors and the past media appearances that we've made. So I encourage everybody to just, Google it, the Smartlys. You won't regret it.
Oh, thank you, Shelley. This was just such a delight and such a lift in my day. I can't thank you enough.
Well, thank you. It's such an honor and a pleasure to be able to meet you. And I love your podcast and the positive bent that you have on it, and encouraging people to reach for their dreams and showing them how to get there as well. I think that that's extremely important. And you're making a difference all around the world.
Well, thank you. But right back at you. I just love our conversation, and keep doing these amazing things, as I know you will.
Thank you, Kate. You too.
Thanks so much for listening to Be the Good with Kate Chericello. Whether you're listening on YouTube or via podcast, it would mean the world if you liked, subscribed, and or left a review. You heard about the good? Now go out and be the good in your life this week. If you have stories of good news that need to be shared, please send me a message. Thanks again, and have a great week.